might have the same problem too. They might just make that change.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 18th, 2025 meeting of the Litchfield Planning Board. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do the roll call of members present. Michael Croto, Chair.
Jared O'Connell, Vice Chair.
Jeremy Robitaille, Secretary.
Steve Gaines, Selectman's Rep.
Travis Tucker, Member.
Russell Blanchett, Member.
Jesse No, alternate.
Lisa Riley, member.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome back. Had a little reprieve before we started up again in February. We have Jay Mankara from NRPC with us this evening, our circuit rider. Good evening. And Joe McKibben, our planning board assistant or administrator. I think we are a full board, so I do not think we have to nominate alternates this evening to vote. First item is public input on non-agenda items not on the agenda for this evening. And members of the public who wish to comment on non-agenda items tonight. And seeing nobody in the gallery, I'll close public input on non-agenda items. And that brings us to number one this evening, which is application from Liberty Utilities, an alteration of terrain, informational only. Joan, do you want to provide us a little input on this?
Sure. This is regarding Liberty Utilities' application to New Hampshire DES for their alteration of terrain. They've just started the application process. This was dated January 30th. To bring a gas line down from the airport and down through Litchfield in the state right of way along 3A, switching east and west side of the road, and going across the river just north of Cummings Drive on the Eversource easement. They will be boring under the river. There's at least three stream crossings along 3A, which will be boring under the streams. If you get a chance to watch the Conservation Commission meeting of last week, February 13th, where Jason Brennan spent quite a bit of time looking at the application and going over, telling the Conservation Commission what his take on it was. He had a good layout of the road cross sections, and because originally when we looked at it, we thought we didn't have a very good map, and we thought it was going on one side of 3/8. It's not. It's going on the opposite side of the water lines. Can't be on the same side of the road as the water lines. There's a February 25th 9 a.m. meeting here with Liberty Utilities for informational. If anybody can make it there, welcome.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's school vacation week, so this won't be here.
So are they asking us tonight to?
No, they're not asking us for anything. That was just information for you to tell you that this is happening. They're just in the beginning process on permits. It'd be 26 or 2027 before they even started. 26, 27.
Okay.
They have to get all their permits first.
So they're not looking for comments tonight?
Well, they are looking for comments. If you wish to comment on the application, which we only had one copy, you could watch, like I said, the Conservation Commission meeting was pretty thorough. Jason went through, and they are giving us to February 8th, that's today, February 18th, because it was February 13th, so they're giving us to February 18th for comments.
But you can comment online.
Right.
Okay. In terms of the Conservation Commission, I didn't watch the meeting, but were there any concerns by the Conservation Commission regarding this project?
Well, there is a big wetland on the Eversource easement going down where they're going to go east-west to get across the river. And we want to know what they would be doing on that one. I don't think the directional boring on the streams, I don't think is that much of a concern. I'm sure DES and the Wetlands Bureau will have things to say about that, and, but there is a large wetland on that Eversource easement. So we would like to know how they're going to handle that. And George Lavash and Fred,
French.
thank you, French, are going to go to that meeting, February 25th.
Jay, do you have anything to add on this?
Not really, that, there is no board action that's required. I think the only thought I had, I mentioned to Joan, is, since they're going to be going down 3A, parallel to the road, I wonder if there's an opportunity to just leave it with a wider shoulder, a wider unpaved shoulder, which would obviously be nice for pedestrians.
Does the board have any questions, anything that they want to comment on the application?
I'm wondering what Litchfield gets out of this. This seems like a pipeline designed to feed Merrimack. It
No,
just
it's a
comes
loop.
right through our town.
It's a transmission line, and it's to make a loop.
Feed
You said
Merrimack.
going on the north side of Budweiser?
Right, to feed Merrimack. What does Litchfield get?
No, I don't think it's to feed Merrimack.
No, I think it's more for, I don't know what it's actually feeding, but it's.
I think, well, to make a loop, and I think it's going to feed off another line that we have over on that side.
Yeah,
But
over in Merrimack, that's gonna
that would
help keep
be
the plant running.
questions for February 25th.
But it won't provide service to Litchfield.
No.
Yeah, this is
That was gonna be my
stuff.
question, is there an opportunity? It's not a high pressurized line,
It
right?
is. It's 160 PSI.
Yeah,
Oh, it
it's
is.
12 inches in
12 inch.
diameter. This is gigantic.
Yeah, we had one of those going
gonna
through our
punch a
old
36 inch
neighborhood,
line through
and
my neighborhood.
the reason you couldn't tap into it was just for that reason. But, yeah.
My
I agree
understanding-
with Russ, what's in it for us, because that was always my question.
Well, it's in the state right away.
Right, we don't have a choice.
Yeah,
Yeah, my understanding, it's a 12-inch feeder, and you can tap off it if they drop it down.
With station.
But it's not the, 36-inch or whatever it is, enormous pipe that everybody's afraid of.
Well, maybe with Jay's comment regarding the road,
Yeah, that's a
think we
good
can-
comment.
maybe add that as input.
And maybe, the question as to whether or not future service lines would be possible to tap off that.
Now, looking at the map of the pipelines, the main natural gas pipeline goes through Pelham, Londonderry, Manchester, Hooksett. So this will probably, but there's another line feeding off of that through Hudson into Nashua. So this will create the loop, as was said, by connecting Merrimack to Londonderry. Yeah, I looked over all the engineering drawings that is in the document, and it looks, there's a lot of technical drawings and stuff on there, so I'll leave it to the engineers to make the final calls on all of that.
Anything else? Okay.
Well, it just occurred to me that this is something I need to double check, but there may be a regulatory implication for us if this is considered a gas line. In that there's a notification requirement
Okay.
by statute that the utility company has to be notified for any projects, I think within 1,500 feet
Of what?
of a pipeline. So whether this falls into that category, that's not a huge deal. It just does mean, though, that there'll be a notice requirement.
Once it's in
place. I know that's definitely true for the line that goes through Pelham and Hudson.
do they know the overall time frame? It's unclear to me, like, how long would this be
Couple
under
year, probably a couple
construction?
years
Yeah.
to construct.
Yeah,
I think
so,
they
I
said-
mean, it's Yeah, it's happening in the right of way, but at the same time, it's inconveniencing town folk from
It's, well,
driving
they'll,
up and
yeah,
down.
the police chief, the police department is very interested in it because they're going to have details up and down.
Yeah.
Where they're,
The
working.
road crosses there.
Hmm?
At the road crossings.
This will be going right past GMS. Are there any concerns of a pipeline of this size in proximity to a school like this?
As long as it functions properly, it shouldn't do anything.
As long as it functions properly.
Yeah.
Is this considered a taxable asset? Would we be able to get some tax income off of
I
this?
think they've changed, town administrator was saying they changed the way that they're taxing utilities, so I don't, in the past, I would think yes, but I don't know how that works now.
Trying to find any angle for benefiting Litchfield from this project.
Ideally, they would tap off of it to have new service to Litchfield residents, but that's expensive. And the density of Litchfield is relatively low, which makes it less economically viable.
But the digging's easy. So it's density low, but easy to dig. So not much granite in the way.
It looks like they have notes on there, or the plan, I guess, regarding,
over.
fishing game comments.
Oh, yeah, they had colored
Species and all that.
pictures in there,
Yeah.
Snakes, turtles.
and what they're supposed to do if they find critters. Hopefully no seal pups like in Connecticut.
Well, it sounds like there'll be more to come, obviously, they'll be coming back.
Critters.
Well, if anybody can make that February 25th meeting, that would be, I don't know if they're able to tape that, I forgot to ask, John.
Is that gonna be held here?
Here, yeah. 9 AM.
It's a difficult time spot to record. Everybody's out of town.
I'm here, so if you want to teach me how to do it, I'll do it. I'll be here at the meeting.
I have another meeting that
There's
day. Can't do it.
Right. Well, everybody, maybe just with the comment that Jay made, but everyone else have good for now, or? Okay. All right, so I guess we'll make that comment and, can let them know. All right. That, number 2 tonight, seems like we have only just begun this, but review and brainstorming of Litchfield subdivision and site plan regulations are kind of come right back to something that we've been doing all along. So obviously, I know Jared and I know Letha attended the town meeting, and I believe Russ was there as well. I don't know if anyone else attended. Forgive me if I didn't see you. So we did present our zoning amendments, and it was an interesting meeting. Let's just put it that way. There were questions. So stuff on the multi-village district, and we had some questions about the building inspector, the code, and, the appeal process and all that, so. And I know that some of us submitted some stuff to Kim Kleiner regarding for the voter guide, to sort of clarify any issues that may be out there, people have questions about. And it is funny because, and I didn't even think of it too, because that the fact is that once you make the changes to the zoning amendment, you can't bring them up at town meeting. It has to be done here in the public hearings. So that's always something I always forget. But, I keep reminding me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I can't do that. So some people wanted to ask questions, but really couldn't because they weren't at the hearings, so, just for future reference, if we do have, those public hearings, then that is the opportunity for the folks in the town to weigh in, on those zoning amendments.
Yeah, so I believe the voter guide will go out soon.
Yeah.
We iterated a little bit on the zoning amendment 1 wording.
Mhm.
The final wording was based on Jaden Carr's wording, and then I added some additional clarifications after. So it
And
was
I think I submitted my stuff to Kim as well, notes, so.
yeah, this amendment would allow the creation of option of creating developments that provide a variety of housing types, whether commercial uses and commercial uses in open space in the Northern Commercial District. The purpose of the amendment is to encourage development of new commercial uses in the Northern Commercial District to expand the tax base and provide meet community needs while providing a wider range of housing alternatives in a physically balanced way based on traditional New England mixed-use village design. The proposal requires a minimum amount of commercial space per residence and requires that applicants provide data demonstrating that each development would physically benefit the town. The permitted commercial uses are the same as the existing permitted uses in the Northern Commercial District, with the exception that uses deemed incompatible with residences are not permitted, and inns and beds and breakfasts are permitted. For the full list of conditions and approved uses, copies of the proposed amendment are available, and then we'll add whatever was needed there.
So with that, obviously, we'll wait and see what the town has to say in terms of the voting on those amendments. But this is an opportunity tonight to start thinking and brainstorming about other things that we could be looking at in terms of subdivision and site plan regulations. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pinkara, our circuit rider.
And I was hoping this would be an opportunity for people to kind of throw off things that they're thinking about. Our window kind of is really town meeting to fall. In fall is usually when we really have to start worrying about zoning ordinance amendments because we're under the town meeting time schedule. And so pretty much that's what we did last year. We focused this spring on really stormwater. I mean, that was the thing. It was really, really all consuming. And then of course it came back again. It was an opportunity for us to really spend a lot of time focusing on a section of the ordinance. And we might not have to be nearly that intensive again. So there's really a few things that, come to mind for me. One, if the zoning amendment passes for the Northern Commercial Zone, one of the things that we had talked about is kind of the balance of what do you put in the regulations versus the ordinance. And we kind of wanted the ordinance to be really as clear and limited as possible, what permitted uses, et cetera. And then when we start to think about when we were looking at some of the images, and we can share those again, of kind of what these mixed-use developments do and look like, and how do we want to think about the compatibility of the design between the commercial uses and the residential uses, the connectivity between those. We've talked about, we did put language in there that they have to be connected, but what does that look like? What does parking look like? Landscaping, screening. So I think there's a lot to think about that is probably, not necessarily, but probably specific to a mixed-use development. And I think it would take some time for us to think that through, develop it, and look at some examples that we've, from other communities, and come up with something that really works. And I think that would give us the window to do that. Realistically, if this does pass in March, certainly it's going to be a period of months before we see an application. So we're really going to want to, but it might not be that many months. So we really do want to spend a lot of time around that. We don't know if it's going to pass yet. It probably doesn't hurt to start looking at some other examples. It's not that long until town meeting. It's, we have less, 3 weeks? So we'll know really, really soon. And so that's just kind of throwing it out there. I'll share, again, kind of the examples that we had before. And, some of those are good, some of those are not. And I think it's worth doing a little bit of digging into what some other communities have done. to come up with some design standards. Something else that just might be worth doing for people who haven't done it, because it may have been a while, is to go through our design guidelines and give those some thought. We do have pretty good design guidelines, but inevitably they wind up being dated, and there's things that we didn't think about. So a couple of things I know that came up is our design guidelines are building design guidelines. As when we did have the proposed gas station, there was a lot of talk about the appearance, and our guidelines really didn't address it. It didn't address things like canopies. It didn't address gas pumps. I mean, those are things that are really, really visible, obviously, on a site like that. So I think while we do have good design guidelines, they really don't address the full scope of a site and what it might look like. And I think that's probably something that's worth taking a look at. And then we have some things that I would call much more mundane. We have a definition of a butter in both the site plan and the subdivision regulations. It's obviously not consistent with the new statutory requirement. That's really, really minor. There have been, so parking is another one. Our parking regulations are very out of date. A lot of them don't, I don't want to say that they don't make sense. I don't know that we could defend the basis for why it's however many spaces per barber chair or whatever, or why one commercial use needs 5 spaces and another needs 7. Realistically, what most communities did is copy the regulations that another community had when we first adopted them, and didn't give it a whole lot more thought than that. So there is a lot there, I think, that's out of date. But there have been a few things that kind of came to the surface. This happened a couple of years ago when we realized that our regulations really don't address a multi-tenant site. We break down a lot of individual uses, but a shopping center has multiple uses, and they change and they come and go. And so that's just something that we don't address well. And it probably isn't a problem for a, hair salon to become a retail store, but they have different parking requirements. So it's just, a lot of communities do have something specific for a multi-tenant shopping center. And it's not the cumulative requirement for each store simply because there's overlap. So it's something that I think we want to think about. And also kind of thinking back to some things that came out recently. Well, I'll just back up on that point. Why that really came to a head is we had a particular development that was contentious. And so the parking requirement and whether or not the use met the parking requirement became a significant issue with that proposal. That's not the only reason to look at parking, but that's what really brought it forward. It's like, well, gee, there's a lot of things that we're not really addressing. So just as an example, when you have an individual business, and part of that business is an office, and maybe they have a showroom, and maybe they have storage or warehousing, how do you break that down? Do we say, well, it's primarily a warehousing use, so we're going to use the warehousing parking standard, or do you say they have X square feet of office, they have X square feet of retail, we don't address that either, but it will give you a very different result when you're done. So that was just kind of one of the things is, how do we address it? We're really silent on that. A couple of other things that came up, I think we probably saw recently with a multifamily development that we had, that we required 2 parking spaces in a garage, and the garage had to be of dimensions that were kind of like, well, why? Why can't you have a 1-car garage? Why does that have to be? Why do we only define dimensions for multifamily parking spaces and no other parking space? That kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If we want dimensions, that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense to have them to a particular use. So, these things pop up as you go along. Also related to multifamily housing is we had some statutory changes that came into effect last year. Well, came into effect this year, I think effective in September. And those essentially limit our ability to require more than one parking space for studio or one-bedroom units, especially in larger developments or affordable housing developments. We do have a larger requirement than that. Most communities base your parking standards for residential on number of bedrooms. We don't do that, but we probably should. We absolutely have to address the statutory change. We don't see a whole lot of studio apartments developed in Litchfield, but we still should address the statutory requirement. The other requirement that we now have, and this will matter when it comes to mixed-use developments, if we get there, is we have to allow for multifamily housing developments an alternative parking plan. That does not have a lot of relevance to Litchfield for the most part. What that means is that if somebody can demonstrate that they have an alternative way of providing parking other than on-site parking, then you have to consider that proposal. That really is much more relevant in an urban setting where you can say, we're going to lease spaces in a garage, or let us use on-street parking. That's less relevant here. But that is something that could be relevant in a mixed-use development where you say, well, this is actually shared parking between the commercial development and the residential development, and we think there's an offset because the parking demand, peak demand, for the residential offsets peak demand for the commercial, arguably. If that were an office use, that would be an argument. So we do have to amend our parking regulations to reflect what statute says. That also kind of ties back, though, to our mixed-use developments, and is that something we want to see? Do we want to see shared parking? Because if so, we'll want our site plan regs to talk about that as an option. That could be a good option, but we'll want to talk about it if that's something we want to see. Mundane, so a couple of years ago, and if it's valuable, we started looking at parking, and we looked at some examples from other communities, and I think we shared some of those materials. And if there's an interest in looking at parking, I'd be happy to share those materials. It's, less fun, but it's a thing, right? The other thing that I also notice is our buffer yard requirements. That's not something that comes up a lot. I think it's kind of one of those requirements that we've tended not to pay a lot of attention to. But we do require buffers between residential and non-residential development, which you can't do on a mixed-use site, obviously. So that's also kind of something that I think we want. We have intra and inter-district requirements for buffers, and exactly what the distinction is, I'm really not sure. But at any rate, that's something else that we're going to want to think about. So yeah, those are kind of, I think looking at design guidelines are probably a little more fun, and coming up with guidelines for mixed-use development, if those happen, I think would be really interesting. And then we've got some other things that we should, I'm sure there's more things I'm not thinking of, but those are just some of the things that kind of came to the surface, things that we have to correct because of statute, things that are not really workable, things that we kind of ignore because... Right. I mean, I will say the dimensional requirements for a parking garage for multifamily absolutely slipped by us in prior ones. I did not focus on that at all until the last one that we had. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And we waived it. Right. So that was kind of my list, and other folks might have some other thoughts, but I think if any of these make sense, we can start to circulate some materials and examples and links and.
Well, we did talk about yield plans.
Yield plans, we did. That's ordinance. So that might be something for us to look at, but that's an ordinance requirement. So yeah, I'm sure there's a few things on the ordinance front we're gonna wanna get to. And there's no rule that says we have to wait. I mean, we can do ordinance work anytime we want.
If we can, like, have the public hearings in the middle of the spring, there's nothing wrong with that. It's less stress because you're not in a rush.
This is true, and you can do that. They don't have a binding effect, but you can do that.
What date range
Um,
do they become binding?
Off the top of my head, 180 days
Okay, so,
is when they have preclusive effect. But yeah, I mean, there is. The only reason I say focus on regulations is because we have the luxury of some time to spend, and once we get into the fall, that slips away. But yeah, I mean, we can talk ordinance stuff anytime, that we wish.
yeah, we also have, on the ordinance side, definitions that we probably need to update.
It's probably a good idea to look at all of our definitions. Again, that's really not fun stuff, but usually when we start going down that road, I have in a couple of towns, and what we find is there's archaic terminology that we just don't use. We might as well just get rid of it. And there are terms of art that we are using that we're not defining. Of course, that's inevitable. And I'm sure the same thing's true in our ordinance. We've probably added language just this last round that might be helpful to define. Usually it winds up coming to light when you've got an issue.
Yeah, I don't think the definition of inn and bed and breakfast specifically are in our ordinance.
You're right. You're right.
I mean,
I remember that.
We all sort of defined what that should be and why that's different than a hotel and a motel for the ordinance's sake, but yeah, it's not in the ordinance from my memory of it.
That's a very good point. You're right. And in fact, in another community I work in, because they had an issue, they went through and defined every type of temporary stay.
Yep.
That they could think of, from a Airbnb type situation all the way down lodging house, rooming house, everything.
Yurt,
I'm sorry.
they cover yurts.
They did not cover yurts specifically. They did, though, because that came up. That came up in another community, and yeah, they proposed yurts or just the glamping tents on a couple of properties. That, in fact, was what triggered in that community. That's what triggered a whole temporary stay section of the ordinance, which was interesting. I'm digressing, but two different communities. One, their focus was all about how to restrict them. And the community 2 towns over was, this is great. And, yeah. They saw it as a nice adjunct to agricultural uses, and nice that people have a place to stay in our town. We don't have any hotels or motels. So it was really interesting to see the different views on something like that. But that is true, that we don't address any of that in Litchfield. And we certainly could if we felt a need. And I'm sure there's more things that have come up over time.
Anybody have any thoughts, what they'd like to see going forward?
I think Jay started a great list so far. All that stuff is fantastic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'd like to see, it sounds like you've started the, sort of the workings of the makings of a framework so to help us go through, because there's gonna be a lot of stuff, and I think it's, as we go through certain sections or areas that you might suggest, I'm worried that we could be here all night each time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to the extent that you could kind of guide us and have sort of a working framework where certain things we know are going to build on other things, and it'll keep us on task, I think.
Yeah.
Would be really helpful.
I think that makes sense.
Also, if you have any actual access to research on parking or whatever else, not just other towns' use cases, but actual research on what makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Would be great.
And there's definitely a lot. Parking has become big for those who look at a lot of planning stuff. It's a big issue now. So there's a lot of literature on parking. In fact, the parking guru just passed away, Donald Shoup. If you ever really want to go down a nerdy rabbit hole, read The High Cost of Free Parking. It's really sorry. But yeah, so parking is a bigger, and that's why we've seen legislation related to parking and housing, because parking requirements are seen as a cost factor in housing.
Another thing about housing or parking is it often creates just ugly areas that don't make the town look good.
Big parking lots.
And more surface area, more impervious area. It's got MS4 implications, so absolutely. Although I don't know if we want to go down that road, related to that, our street widths. Ours are very high.
Street what?
Widths.
Oh, yeah.
Our minimum widths are very, very high.
We talked about this a few months ago with Jared and stuff like that. We brought this up.
One of the problems with the widths is just going very fast down the streets.
Yes,
Upside is it's easy to get around obstacles and
totally.
parked cars. You can have parking on both sides and you can get through without much of a problem. But having a narrow road and then open up for some parking spots, then narrowing and then opening up will naturally slow people down more.
Roads around here tend to be self-narrowing as growth occurs just off to the sides, the trees, the overgrowth never gets cut back. In my neighborhood, it's getting narrower and narrower.
All the
You
new
pass your
development,
neighbor come and they're both scraping trees.
all of the new developments have unfortunately removed a lot of the trees, so that's not the case in the newer ones.
And the main arteries are all
That'll
very
change.
wide.
Yeah,
Trees
I was
will
gonna
grow.
say with time it'll
Well,
change.
a lot of people have lawns there. As long as they mow, no trees are coming.
But I think if you have like a mixed-use development, right, and you start narrowing some of those passageways to help traffic calming, for lack of a better term, what happens when you have a winter like we're having right now, where there's so much snow, you can't, where is it going to go?
Yeah, snow removal
right?
costs might
And
skyrocket.
then you worry about it hitting people because you can't clear the sidewalk, and so there's all that sort
Yeah.
of complication as well.
There is. You should see my neighborhood.
Yeah, another
There's no place to put it.
one thing that we might want to consider in the design guidelines for the mixed-use development is the covered parking. I can't imagine the residents of Litchfield would love the standard look for those detached parking garages. They're just long things with a bunch of parking stalls in it. In the back of it's just a weird long building with no windows. Just even requiring some windows on it, and maybe something to break up the roof, make it look more fitting with the town.
A lot of places now are turning those into putting solar panels on top too.
Yep.
And what does that do for reflection and in the area?
Yeah. Do you
It's
have?
true. In some developments, those are the most prominent feature.
Yeah, and often you have the buildings facing the road, and then in front of those are the parking stalls. So the closest thing to the road may be a parking stall or parking garage that doesn't look great.
Yeah, so you focus so much on the facade and what people see of the buildings, and then they pop up this ugly parking structure.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Do you-
carports.
Do you know of any regulations that other towns have put in place for these?
Yes. I mean, well, one, applying design guidelines to those also. But, I mean, the main way, and especially the traditional mixed-use type setting, is to require that they're, in the side of the rear, so that they're not in front.
Yeah.
And that's the most typical.
Yeah, and we could have more lax requirements when it is not visible from the road.
Yeah. And from the road, we could always add on having staggered roof lines or other features to break up the monotonous line of shingles.
Yes.
We have one thing in our regulations that says there's a maximum continuous length of roof, but that's it. And the proposal, if it gets passed, does not limit the number of units in a building. So that could create a very big building.
Right, it could.
I'm assuming we have regulations already in place that will still limit it in terms of height, but that's probably the main current limitation that would apply.
Right, nothing to limit its linear extent.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something to think about. Are our current regulations adequate, and if not, what do we need to look at? So yeah.
I think we brought up was it the issue of the garages, the dumbbell look? I think you had presented us.
Oh, and the two families, the
And the two
dumbbell?
families,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in those situations, having a lot of those is not the most appealing, but it's good when you live there because you're further from you have no shared living walls.
Right. That was all about the firewall thing and that.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing that we may want to address is the certain things that came up during the recent subdivision that we had, the big like Talarico Street one. There were some issues that came up aside from the yield plan. Some people had concerns over like a single access point for them, and I think that also is a question for other developments as well, where the only thing that's really enforcing the second egress is recommendations from fire, I think.
Right. And cul-de-sac length, like how long can a dead-end street be?
We have a lot of parts in, like, a lot of developments in Litchfield where you have over 40 houses with a single road to get to it, and we haven't heard of any problems from that
Yet.
yet.
I live in one of those developments. If a tree comes down across Nesbitt, we're all trapped in the neighborhood.
Get out your chainsaws.
Right. And that did come up, and I think what was pointed out in those hearings is that most surrounding communities do have a limit, on length. It's absolutely something we could look at again if it's a concern.
In my opinion, we don't want to be too strict on it because some of those is just has to do with density. As long as you can get a fire hose to it, you're probably fine because there's not a life safety risk anymore.
Yeah, but then the non-dead end or cul-de-sac roads lead to better community flow though, as far as people want to walk around more versus walking down straight and back. So, a lot of communities are going towards that development to have more inclusive neighborhoods. So,
And speaking of that, one thing that would be nice is for cul-de-sacs to have, like, when the cul-de-sac ends next to another street, having a walkway there would be ideal, but I don't see many developments where this would apply because there are some situations where to walk, like you can end up with a house here and a road here, but to get to that road, you would have to do a very roundabout way to get there. When you could trespass through the woods to get there, but that would be trespassing. So having certain pedestrian rights of way would be good, but I don't think it's a high priority to codify.
Well,
I'm sure we'll come up with more.
I'm sure we can, and obviously, if anybody has any suggestions, you can talk to Jay, or can discuss it further. I think it's a good opportunity to think about these things as we move forward into 2025, and obviously, have the opportunity to look at them. I think parking is probably going to be a main one this time around, and I think, you know, if you want to add anything else, I'm sure we'll take a look at those.
It's also,
Good stuff.
yeah, and it's kind of nice now, we don't know what's gonna come down the pike, but right now, we have a little bit of a lull,
Opportunity, right.
which, those go away. You know, when
Quickly.
something, yeah, I mean, they do. We've had those periods where there's no way we can devote time.
Yeah, and with this, like, a mixed-use community thing coming in, to have the regulations for design style would be very helpful to us, like you mentioned with the gas pumps and stuff like that.
It's definitely something I think we need to prioritize, because if it does pass, we're going to see.
Yeah, it won't take long.
It
because
won't take
We have
long.
a developer who has already paid someone to come up with concept drawings, who is the exact same engineer who would actually engineer the real ones.
You have to have the commercial that's willing to go in there, though, that's the issue these days.
And then,
March 4th, we have one application coming in, subdivision lot line adjustment. That's it.
and
Well,
then,
I mean, if we want to schedule a workshop in March or something, if there's availability.
We could-
March 18th is a home occupation, that wouldn't take very long.
That wouldn't take long.
So that would be a good,
That would be a
that'd be a
perfect
good date, yeah.
opportunity to start.
if this passes, I think it's very important that we have a workshop on
That'd be good timing.
that.
that's right, because that's right after town meeting,
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's a good.
Perfect.
That would be good.
Yeah.
And yeah, in addition to that developer that has come in already, there's land for sale that would qualify under the proposed mixed-use development. So if anyone buys it, and the value of it theoretically would go up if it's more developable. So
Right.
it's also a possibility. Same developer, different developer, who knows? But
Very true.
It's expensive. I doubt someone would buy it just to sit on it.
We'll check for offers on March 12th.
The what?
We'll check for offers on March 12th.
There we go. All right, more to come. I'll start putting together some stuff and
Sounds
getting it out
good.
to everybody.
Thank you, Jay. Moving on to committee reports. Any reports from any committees? Jay, do you have anything about?
No, other than, unless you're gonna say, we do have a regional planning commission meeting tomorrow night.
I am, fortunately, I'm not going to be in attendance, only because I have a conflict with another meeting. So I have regrets on that. I'll try and catch the.
Yes, and of course, and if anybody wants to, you can zoom in. You don't have to go in person, but probably, so the main agenda items are gonna be, we do have Pierce Rigrod from New Hampshire DES is doing a presentation on some proposed model ordinance that they're working on, specifically to regulate PFAS in industrial applications, so that could be interesting. I've heard him talk before, and I was really quite surprised at the number of products that have PFAS in them and why, and how widely used it is, why it's so challenging to get it out of the process, including one of the most, prominent, I shouldn't say the most prominent uses, but one of the ones that really jumped out at me are basketball courts. In all of our schools, all of our gyms, it just works marvelously on those floors. There's so many applications like that. I had absolutely no idea.
The fluorine is really good at preventing bonds from occurring that you don't want to happen. But that also makes them hard to get rid of because they don't bond with anything.
Right. So at any rate, it was interesting. So they are proposing, trying to propose some model rules. So we'll have a bit of a presentation on that. And then our endless, it seems to me, transportation improvement program updates and amendments, but there will be an update. So of course, we'll be talking a lot of transportation as well.
Conservation Commission met last week.
And they have the ice fishing derby February 22nd from 8 to noon, I believe it is, at Darapon.
Great.
And the kids just have to show up, don't bring anything.
Okay.
Yep, the ice is over 13 inches thick.
On the road?
Wow.
Yeah, on the road to the pond.
Driveway.
Keeps dropping and the pond will be completely frozen.
I did attend, last Thursday, I did attend the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee meeting. They had a project in Merrimack. It had to do with storing, a facility for storing big trucks. I guess there's a market for that, so.
Storing what?
Big trucks, like the tractor-trailer trucks. There's a building that they want to build up on Mass Road. Not far from the river, but it's up. If you go, are you gonna die?
I only might.
I wish.
If you're going up the Everett Turnpike, if you're going south to Nashua, there's a if you look off to the left, you'll see a huge warehouse. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's new.
That near that warehouse in that
Is he
vicinity.
heading
of
north
that
or
area.
south? South on the
South,
Everett
yeah.
Turnpike?
So they're gonna put in some sort of a, it's like a storage facility for these trucks. So,
It's like the vault in Merrimack.
Along those lines, when you were at meetings, did they discuss the pipeline or the proposed recycling plant in Nashua, Merrimack?
no, there were only 4 of us at the meeting. We had a
Okay.
quorum. It was a very short meeting. It was actually 30 minutes. I was in and out. But they did not mention anything about the pipeline. Although I did notice on the document that was presented to us this evening, it does say Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee, so I wonder if they did comment on it already.
Well, that was just this year, January 30th, though. We got it
Okay,
February
it says
5th.
Frammer for Lower Merrimack. So.
And then in Merrimack, there was a proposal to go north of the Bud plant, almost directly across, a recycling plant for like solid recycling. And there was gonna be 2 factories, 2 buildings, 55,000 square feet. And that's right on the river.
Yeah.
It'll be in the open space right now that runs along the tracks. Curious if they,
Yeah,
I
and
think
that,
that would
maybe
be on the
that's in
target.
the works, I don't know. Usually they will let us know when we get a project for the alteration of terrain permit for the shoreline.
Right, because we were also wondering whether that would be regional impact in the town again.
Yeah, because I think they only just presented it, they didn't apply it, I don't think that
Right.
Merrimack one.
Right.
So, and I guess Fran Murphy is stepping down as the chair of the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee. I know we have a couple folks from Litchfield on the committee. So if anyone who's on that committee is interested in becoming the next chair of the Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee, reach out to Fran. He's looking for someone to take his place. And Capital Improvement Committee, I think our next meeting is April 7th.
Yes.
And so we will be doing that in April. And that's all I have for committee reports. Oh, I'm sorry, Jeremy, did Economic Development, I know you haven't,
We have missed more meetings this winter than I can imagine, but we do have a meeting coming up next week
okay,
in this room at 6:30 on the 26th.
okay.
All are welcome to come.
Approval of the January 21st, 2025 minutes. Did anybody have an opportunity to take a look at those? Portal, have any questions about them? Concerns? I didn't see any.
I didn't see anything wrong. No.
Someone has something that they want to discuss or amend. And if not, I will entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 21st planning board minutes.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Travis. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approval of the January 21st, 2025 meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm gonna abstain because I don't know if I was here.
Who's abstaining?
Just Steve.
Okay, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4.
the absentees.
We weren't here.
Was I here?
No, you weren't.
No, okay.
So that's 1 abstaining. And so we have 1.
Abstain,
You're abstaining.
yeah.
Abstain.
4.
4. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5, 0. And who's abstaining again? Just raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But it should be 3, right? Because you didn't put Jesse in a voting role.
Yeah, is he
right?
voting today?
Right.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I messed up
Yes,
the count.
yes, I apologize.
Yeah, I said,
Yeah,
that's my-
I tried to include you, I'm sorry. So, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. 4, 0.
Good to go.
It's a technicality, but an important.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I should have recognized that. Okay, thank you. Any other business this evening? I do have something. I received this from town administrator, and if I can pull up the
The members one.
email. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to talk about that briefly. So, we received an email from Kim Kleiner about the planning board membership and the terms for the membership. So, my term as chairperson runs out in 2026. Jared is 2027. Travis is 2025. Jeremy is 2026. Russ is 2027. Letha Riley is 2025. Jesse No is an alternate 2027. So the terms those are the terms for which we run. So we need to review the list for our records to agree. We have, obviously, Travis and Letha are for 2025. So we need to vote on, the board needs to recommend your reappointment to the Board of Selectmen. And we would send the information of the results of that vote to Kim Kleiner. So I guess, starting with Letha, since your term is up in 2025, does anyone want to entertain a motion to recommend reappointment of Letha Riley for the Board of Selectmen?
So moved.
And are you interested?
Or are you interested? I don't want to, I don't want to just throw you in there if you're interested.
All told.
I'm happy to continue to
Okay,
serve
great.
if it's
Thank you.
at the pleasure of.
We certainly,
Selectmen, yeah.
that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so, anyone want to make a motion to recommend?
We just had one, right?
Oh, we did?
We took her acceptance first, so.
Okay, got it.
I am now so moved that she accepted.
Okay, and I have a second?
Second.
Second by Russ. So we have a motion by Jeremy, second by Russ. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of recommending a reappointment to the Board of Selectmen, Letha Riley, for planning board member, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Can I vote?
If you want to.
Okay.
Why not?
All right, I'll vote.
I have no problem. Okay, so those opposed, those abstained.
I'll abstain.
Okay, so the motion passes.
You can vote.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 0, 1. Okay.
Well, actually, I could vote yes because my vote to the Board of Selectmen is going to be representative of the board and not my own personal vote. So put me down as a yes.
Okay, so, got it. So 6, all right.
7.
7-0.
It's unanimous.
Yeah.
Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Okay. And next is, obviously, Jared, not Jared, Travis, is to recommend him for reappointment to the Board of Selectmen for 2025. Do I have a motion?
And are you interested and would you like to
Yes, would
keep your
definitely.
current position?
For sure.
Even if you said no, we'd make a motion.
We're gonna do it anyway, so you like it, no. Okay, so, who made the motion?
No one. I'll make
No
a
one yet.
I'll make a motion to recommend the reappointment of Travis Tucker for planning board member.
Second.
And I have second by Russ. So Jared made the motion, second by Russ. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor of voting, recommending to the reappointment of Travis Tucker for the Board of Selectmen, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Why not?
Those opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion passes 7-0-0. All right, well, thank you very much, and we appreciate you staying on, and looking forward to that. Thank you.
Should we, should they have it recorded that Selectman Stephen Gannon is an alternate for Kevin Lynch? I'm assuming they're gonna re-vote who's doing what once his
Yeah.
term expires.
Yeah, after the elections you had March, Kevin is not coming back on. He chose not to, so it'll be Bob and Diane Plansky are running for the open positions. Then at that time, whoever gets on will reappoint.
For my curiosity, Mike, are there dates on this as far as when this is due by, as far as what time of the year? Is they just try to do the first few months?
They usually say usually March. I
Usually
thought.
March,
By March?
Yeah, it's usually March.
Okay.
Yeah, usually after.
So yeah, hopefully the reappointments show up on the next Selectmen agenda. And then you'll have to get sworn in again.
Yes. Yeah, so, okay. Thank you. All right, Jay, do you have anything else this evening?
I do not.
Joan, anything?
No, I have some things for you to sign though, afterwards.
All right. So we had our deliberative session in February 1st. Voting is March 11th, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Campbell High School. So get out and vote. And with that, if there's nothing else this evening, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before you go, the final draft, as we were discussing earlier, the voter guide, the
Oh, yeah.
final draft went
Yeah.
out for approval yesterday, so it's probably gone off to the printers today, so it should be out soon.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Letha, and second?
I'll second Letha's
Second from
motion.
Jeremy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes 7-0-0. Thank you for joining us this evening,
Six copies.
and we will see you in March.
People are sending me 6 copies of plans.
Oh, that's a good one to make a note of.
That one is, it's over here
How many do you really want?
in, 2,
Nice
and
meeting.
then,
on
but then the
Friday.
PDF.
Yes.
That's-
Yes. Yeah, require that the email, copy of the, yes, I agree.
That's pretty good. The other place
Ruling, it's 11 o'clock.
is 510